The designer handbag came down like a weapon, striking Zara's rounded belly with a force that sent her stumbling backward against the concrete pillar. 6 months pregnant and completely unprepared for the assault, she gasped as pain shot through her abdomen. The underground parking garage echoed with the sound of expensive leather meeting flesh, followed by her attacker's venomous words. "You pathetic cow. Do you really think Richard loves you?" Natalie's perfectly manicured nails gleamed as she raised the purse again, her blonde hair whipping around her face in fury. "He's mine now. He told me all about how boring you've become, how you just sit around getting fat with that baby." Zara's hands instinctively moved to protect her unborn daughter, her wedding ring catching the harsh fluorescent light. She'd only come to the medical building for her routine checkup, never expecting to face her husband's mistress in the shadows between parked cars. The security cameras mounted on the ceiling witnessed everything, their red lights blinking like silent observers to her humiliation. "I know about you," Zara whispered, her voice stronger than she felt. "Richard thinks he's clever, but I've seen the receipts." Natalie's face twisted with rage. She swung the heavy bag again, this time catching Zara across the shoulder and sending her phone clattering across the concrete floor. "Those receipts are for me, not you. The jewelry, the trips, the apartment downtown. He's building a life with me while you sit at home playing housewife." The baby kicked hard against Zara's ribs as if sensing the danger. She pressed her back against the cold concrete, trying to create distance between herself and this woman who seemed capable of anything. Natalie's eyes held a wildness that spoke of desperation and entitlement, a dangerous combination. "He's going to leave you," Natalie continued, stalking closer. "After the baby comes, he'll realize what a mistake he made. I'm everything you're not: young, exciting, free. I don't have stretch marks or swollen ankles. I don't complain about morning sickness or demand attention every 5 minutes." Zara's medical appointment had confirmed what she'd suspected: stress was affecting her pregnancy. Dr. Martinez had warned her about elevated blood pressure, had asked gentle questions about her home life that she'd deflected with practiced smiles. Now, as contractions of fear rather than labor gripped her abdomen, she understood that her body had been trying to tell her something all along. "The only mistake," Zara said, finding her footing and standing straighter, "is that Richard married a woman who won't tolerate this. You think you know him, but you don't know me." Natalie laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I know enough. I know you're weak. I know you'll forgive him because you're desperate and pathetic and you have nowhere else to go. Women like you always do." The parking garage felt like a tomb, buried beneath the medical building where Zara had just learned her daughter was healthy and strong. The irony wasn't lost on her moments ago. She'd been listening to her baby's heartbeat, feeling hopeful about the future. Now she stood face to face with the woman who'd been systematically destroying her marriage while she'd been nurturing new life. "You're wrong about me," Zara said, her hand still protective over her belly. "Dead wrong." Natalie raised the purse one final time, but something in Zara's tone made her pause. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her perfectly made-up features. She'd expected tears, begging, maybe even violence in return. Instead, Zara stood calm and steady, her dark eyes holding a promise that made Natalie's confidence waver. "This isn't over," Natalie hissed, but she lowered the weapon that had been disguised as an accessory. "No," Zara agreed, reaching for her fallen phone with deliberate slowness. "It's just beginning." As Natalie's heels clicked away across the concrete, echoing off the walls like gunshots, Zara remained motionless. She waited until the sound of a car engine faded before allowing herself to examine the damage. Her shoulder ached, her belly was tender, but the baby was still moving, still fighting. Just like her mother would be. The security cameras had captured everything, she realized, looking up at the blinking red lights with new appreciation. Whatever Richard thought he knew about his wife, whatever Natalie believed about weak women who forgive, they were about to learn the truth about Zara Thompson. She wasn't the same college girl who'd fallen for Richard's charm 8 years ago. She wasn't the naive newlywed who'd trusted blindly for the first years of their marriage. And she definitely wasn't the desperate housewife that Natalie imagined. She was a woman who'd been pushed too far, and she was done being pushed. The security footage played on Zara's laptop screen for the 5th time, each viewing revealing new details that made her stomach churn. She sat in her home office, the same room where Richard claimed to work late into the night, and watched her own assault with clinical detachment. The baby kicked restlessly, perhaps sensing her mother's emotional turmoil. Pausing the video at the moment Natalie's purse connected with her belly, Zara studied the woman's face. There was no remorse there, only entitlement and rage. This wasn't the face of someone caught up in passion or confused by complicated feelings. This was someone who felt justified in her actions, someone who saw Zara as an obstacle to be removed rather than a person to be respected. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard, "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." The message arrived at 2:47 p.m., the same time stamp on similar messages she'd been receiving for months. Zara opened her laptop's file folder labeled Household Finances and began cross-referencing dates. Richard's late nights coincided perfectly with charges to expensive restaurants she'd never been to, hotel rooms he'd never mentioned, and jewelry purchases that had never appeared under their Christmas tree. The paper trail was damning in its obviousness. Richard had grown careless, or perhaps he simply assumed his pregnant wife was too distracted to notice. The Cartier bracelet purchased last Tuesday, $12,000 charged to their joint account while she'd been buying maternity clothes from the discount rack. The weekend at the Ritz-Carlton while he told her he was at a conference in Chicago except the hotel was downtown, 20 minutes from their house. Zara's hands shook as she opened another bank statement. Richard earned well as CEO of Thompson Industries, the company his father had built and passed down to him. They weren't rich enough to throw away money carelessly, but they were comfortable. At least they had been until Natalie entered their lives. The spending pattern revealed a timeline that made Zara's chest tight. The first expensive dinner at Le Bernardin had been charged 6 months ago, just as she'd entered her second trimester. The hotel charges began shortly after she'd started showing. The jewelry purchases escalated as her belly grew larger. While she'd been creating life, her husband had been building a relationship with another woman. While she'd been planning a nursery, he'd been planning an escape. Zara closed the laptop and walked to the window overlooking their manicured backyard. The garden she planted last spring was blooming beautifully, roses and jasmine creating a fragrant border around the patio where she'd imagined teaching their daughter to walk. This house, with its high ceilings and crown molding, had been their dream home. She'd chosen every paint color, every piece of furniture, every carefully placed photograph. Now it felt like a museum to her own naivety. Her phone rang, Richard's name appearing on the screen. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Hey baby. Just calling to check on you and our little princess. I'll try not to be too late tonight, but this merger is complicated. Love you." The casual endearment "little princess" made her want to throw the phone across the room. He spoke about their daughter with such affection, such apparent anticipation, while simultaneously planning to abandon them both. The contradiction was staggering. Zara walked to the nursery she'd spent weeks preparing. The crib was assembled, the mobile hung perfectly above it. Tiny clothes waited in organized drawers, books lined the shelves, and a rocking chair sat by the window where she'd planned to nurse their baby. Everything ready for a family that was never going to exist. But as she stood among the careful preparations, something shifted in her thinking. This room wasn't a monument to broken dreams, it was evidence of her strength, her planning, her ability to create something beautiful from nothing. The same skills that had prepared for their daughter's arrival could be used to prepare for their future without Richard. Zara returned to her computer and opened a new document. If Richard wanted to play games with money and lies, she'd show him how the game was really played. But first she needed to document everything. Every transaction, every lie, every betrayal. Her daughter deserved better than a father who'd assault her mother through a mistress. And Zara deserved better than a marriage built on deception. The security footage had shown her the truth about Natalie's character. The bank statements revealed the truth about Richard's priorities. Now it was time to learn the truth about her own strength. She opened a new browser tab and searched for the best divorce attorneys in the city. Then she made a list of every asset, every account, every valuable item in their shared life. Richard thought she was weak and naive. Natalie thought she was desperate and pathetic. They were both about to discover how wrong they were. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if approving of the new direction. Zara smiled for the first time since the attack, her hand resting on her belly. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mommy's going to make sure we're both safe and taken care of. And the people who hurt us are going to learn that actions have consequences." The laptop screen glowed with information about legal separation, asset protection, and evidence gathering. Zara had work to do. Colonel James Rodriguez stared at the security monitor in disbelief, his coffee growing cold as he watched the assault unfold for the third time. 20 years in the Marines had shown him violence in many forms, but seeing a pregnant woman attacked in his building's parking garage ignited a fury he hadn't felt since his last deployment. The timestamp showed the incident had occurred 2 days ago, but the footage had only just reached his desk through routine security reviews. As head of security for Thompson Industries corporate headquarters, James made it his business to know everything that happened on or near company property. The medical building was across the street, close enough that their cameras caught the edge of the parking structure. He freeze-framed the video at the moment the victim's face became clear and felt the world tilt sideways. Even 8 years later, even pregnant and obviously distressed, he recognized Zara immediately. The same intelligent dark eyes, the same determined set to her jaw when she was angry or hurt. The same woman who'd occupied his thoughts through 3 tours overseas and countless lonely nights in foreign countries. James had joined the Marines straight after college graduation, partly from patriotic duty but mostly from heartbreak. Zara had been dating Richard Thompson then, the golden boy whose father owned half the city's commercial real estate. James had been a scholarship kid from the wrong side of town, smart enough to earn his engineering degree but too proud to compete with Richard's family money and social connections. Now, watching Zara stand her ground against the blonde woman wielding an expensive purse like a weapon, James felt every protective instinct he'd developed in the military surge to the surface. He'd spent 2 decades learning to assess threats, neutralize dangers and protect the innocent. The woman on his screen was definitely innocent, clearly in danger, and absolutely still beautiful despite everything she was enduring. The attacker was Natalie Pierce, according to the facial recognition software James ran through the company's database. She'd been flagged multiple times for unauthorized access attempts to Richard Thompson's executive floor, usually accompanied by expensive floral arrangements or catered lunches. James had noted her persistence but hadn't realized the implications until now. Richard Thompson. James's jaw clenched as he considered his boss's involvement in this situation. As CEO, Richard demanded absolute loyalty from his security team while apparently showing none to his pregnant wife. The man who lectured employees about company values and family commitments was having an affair that had escalated to violence against the mother of his unborn child. James pulled up Richard's keycard access records and cross-referenced them with the dates Natalie had visited the building. The pattern was clear: she'd been coming to see Richard for months, always during times when his wife would reasonably expect him to be working. The affair wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment, it was a calculated deception that had put Zara in danger. The military had taught James to gather intelligence before taking action, so he spent the next hour reviewing every piece of security footage involving Natalie Pierce. She'd grown increasingly bold in her visits, staying longer each time, becoming more familiar with the building's layout. Her body language around Richard showed ownership, possession, the kind of territorial behavior that often led to escalation. Which explained why she'd attacked a pregnant woman in a parking garage. James made copies of all relevant footage and secured them in multiple locations. Then he did something that went against every protocol in his employee handbook: he used the company's resources to research Zara's current situation. Her address was still the same house she'd shared with Richard when they were newlyweds. Her medical records showed she was 6 months pregnant with her first child. Her social media presence had dwindled to nothing over the past year, suggesting either depression or deliberate withdrawal from public life. The woman he'd loved in college had married the man she thought she wanted, only to find herself isolated, pregnant, and under attack from her husband's mistress. The injustice of it burned in James's chest like shrapnel. His secure phone buzzed with a text from his commanding officer at the Marine Reserve Unit where he served monthly drills. "Rodriguez, heard you're working corporate security now. Keeping busy?" James stared at the message, then at the frozen image of Zara's face on his monitor. He kept busy all right. He'd built a successful second career, earned respect in civilian circles, and created a comfortable life. But he'd never stopped thinking about the one that got away, never stopped wondering what might have been if he'd fought harder for her instead of running away to play soldier. Now she needed someone to fight for her, and James had 20 years of training in exactly that skill set. He reached for his phone to call the police, then stopped. Zara might not want law enforcement involved, especially if she was planning her own response to her husband's betrayal. She'd always been smart, strategic in her thinking. If she was going to handle this situation, she'd do it right. But she didn't have to handle it alone. James saved all the security files to his personal drive and locked his office. For the first time since taking the corporate security job, he was going to bend some rules. Zara needed an ally whether she knew it or not. And James needed to see her again, even if it meant risking his carefully constructed professional life. The Marine in him had never learned to abandon a mission. The man in him had never learned to abandon her. Time to remedy both mistakes. Zara almost dropped her prenatal vitamins when the doorbell rang at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. Richard was supposedly at another late meeting, and she'd grown comfortable in her evening routine of research and planning. Through the peephole, she saw a tall man in a navy suit, his military bearing unmistakable even in civilian clothes. Opening the door with the security chain still attached, she peered through the gap and felt her heart stop. "James? Hello, Zara." His voice was deeper than she remembered, roughened by years of commanding troops and facing dangers she couldn't imagine. "I know this is unexpected, but we need to talk." She closed the door to remove the chain, her hands trembling slightly. When she opened it again, James Rodriguez stood on her doorstep like a ghost from her past, except he was solid and real and looking at her with concern that made her chest tight. "How did you find me?" she asked, stepping back to let him enter. The house suddenly felt smaller with his presence, his broad shoulders and confident stance filling the entryway. "I work security for Thompson Industries," James said carefully. "I saw the footage from the parking garage, Zara. I know what happened to you." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. Someone else knew about the attack, someone who mattered to her in ways she'd buried years ago. "You work for Richard?" "Technically, yes. But right now, I'm here as someone who cares about you." James's dark eyes held hers steadily. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Zara's hand moved instinctively to her belly. "We're fine. Shaken up, but fine. Can we sit down? I have some things to show you." They settled in the living room, James looking oddly formal on the cream-colored sofa she'd chosen to match Richard's aesthetic preferences. Everything in this house reflected her attempts to please her husband. Neutral colors, expensive but impersonal furniture, nothing too bold or individual. Seeing James here made her realize how sterile her environment had become. "I made copies of all the security footage," James said, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. "Not just the assault, but Natalie Pierce's pattern of visits to the building over the past 6 months. I thought you should see what your husband's been up to during his late meetings." The video montage James showed her was devastating in its clarity. Natalie entering the building, staying for hours, leaving with the satisfied expression of a woman whose needs had been met. Richard's car arriving and departing at the same times. Their body language when they appeared together in elevator cameras, intimate, familiar, possessive. "He told me he was working," Zara whispered. "He was working all right. Just not on company business." James's voice held an edge of anger that made her look up at him. "I'm sorry you're seeing this, but you deserve to know the truth." "Why are you showing me this?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "You could lose your job." James was quiet for a long moment, studying his hands. When he looked up, his expression held something that made her breath catch. "Because 8 years ago I was too much of a coward to fight for you. I let Richard win without even trying. I'm not making that mistake again." The words hung between them like a bridge across 8 years of separation, marriages, deployments, and carefully buried feelings. Zara felt tears threatening and blinked them back. She couldn't afford to be emotional right now, not when she needed to think clearly. "James, I'm married. I'm pregnant with another man's child." "You're married to a man who's betraying you and putting you in danger," James said firmly. "And that child deserves a father who'll protect both of you, not one who exposes you to violence." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you don't have to handle this alone. I'm saying I have resources, skills, and 20 years of experience dealing with problems like this." James leaned forward, his intensity filling the space between them. "I'm saying I never stopped caring about you, and I'm not walking away this time." Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decisions she wasn't ready to make. "This is complicated. The best things usually are." When she opened her eyes, James was watching her with patient attention, waiting for her to process everything he'd revealed. He wasn't pushing or demanding, just offering himself as an ally in whatever came next. "If I let you help me," she said slowly, "what does that mean?" "What are you suggesting?" "It means you gather evidence properly. It means you protect yourself and your daughter legally and financially. It means when you're ready to confront Richard and end this marriage, you do it from a position of strength instead of desperation." "And what do you get out of it?" James's smile was sad but genuine. "Maybe a chance to be the man I should have been 8 years ago. Maybe an opportunity to protect the woman I should have fought for then." Zara felt the baby kick hard against her ribs, as if responding to the emotional tension in the room. She placed both hands on her belly and considered her options. She could continue planning her revenge alone, gathering evidence and building her case in isolation. Or she could accept help from someone who'd once meant everything to her, someone who apparently still cared enough to risk his career for her safety. "Richard comes home around midnight," she said finally. "If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it." "We will be. I promise." "And James? This can't be about us. This has to be about doing the right thing for my daughter. Understood. But as James gathered his tablet and prepared to leave, Zara caught him looking at her with something that went deeper than professional concern or old friendship. The feelings they'd buried 8 years ago were still there, waiting beneath the surface like buried treasure. The question was whether either of them was brave enough to dig them up. James arrived at Zara's house the next morning with coffee and a plan, finding her already awake and dressed despite the early hour. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd slept about as well as he had, which was barely at all. "Decaf," he said, handing her a cup. "And breakfast." The bag from her favorite bakery he'd remembered after all these years made her smile for the first time since he'd knocked on her door. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." James set up his laptop on her kitchen table, the same table where she'd probably shared thousands of meals with Richard. The thought made his jaw tighten, but he kept his focus professional. "I've been thinking about our approach. We need to be systematic." Zara sat across from him, her pregnant belly making the chair positioning awkward. She'd changed since college. There was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, but also a strength that impressed him. Pregnancy suited her, made her seem more grounded and purposeful. "I've been doing my own research," she said, pulling out a thick folder. "Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records. Richard's been careless." James reviewed her work with growing admiration. Zara had always been thorough, but this was beyond careful, it was strategic. She documented every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, every lie with dates and supporting evidence. "This is excellent work," he said. "But we can add to it." "How?" "I have access to Richard's keycard records, his computer login times, his company car's GPS data. I can show exactly where he was when he told you he was somewhere else." James opened his laptop and showed her the tracking information. Last Tuesday, when he said he was in client meetings across town, he was at Natalie's apartment building for 4 hours. Zara stared at the GPS data, her hands clenching around her coffee cup. "He came home and told me about the difficult client, how the meeting ran long, how sorry he was for missing dinner." "There's more." James pulled up another file. "Richard's been using company resources for personal expenses. Dinners with Natalie charged to client entertainment. Hotel rooms booked as business travel. If the board of directors saw this, he'd be fired for embezzlement. Can you get copies of those records?" "I already have them." James met her eyes steadily. Along with security footage of Natalie in his office after hours, email exchanges between them on company servers, and financial records showing he's been moving money from business accounts to pay for their affair. Zara was quiet for a long moment, processing the depth of her husband's deception. "He's not just cheating on me. He's stealing from his own company to do it. Which gives you significant leverage in divorce proceedings. Also, if the affair becomes public knowledge, the board will have to take action to protect the company's reputation. You've thought this through." "I've had a lot of time to think." James saved the files to a secure drive and handed it to her. "Everything's here, properly documented and legally obtained." "Well, mostly legally obtained." Zara almost smiled. "What happens to you when this comes out? You could lose your job." "I've lost more important things by not taking action when it mattered." The weight of his words settled between them. "Besides, I've been documenting Richard's policy violations for months. Any reasonable board would have questions about his judgment." They spent the next 2 hours organizing evidence chronologically, building a timeline that showed the evolution of Richard's deception. The pattern was clear as Zara's pregnancy progressed and she became more dependent on him. Richard had grown bolder in his affair and more reckless with company resources. "There's something else," James said as they worked. "I ran a background check on Natalie Pierce. And? She has a history of this. Married men specifically. 3 relationships in the past 5 years, all with wealthy, established men who ended up divorced." James pulled up the report. "She's not just the other woman, Zara. She's a professional home wrecker." The information hit Zara like a physical blow. Richard thinks he's special to her. He's a mark. A target. She saw a successful man with a pregnant wife and calculated that he'd be vulnerable to attention from someone young and unencumbered. Zara stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her hand pressed to her lower back. James wanted to go to her to offer comfort, but he maintained his distance. This wasn't about his feelings for her, it was about giving her the tools to protect herself. "How long have you been gathering this information?" she asked without turning around. "Since the day I saw the security footage of her attacking you." "Why?" "Because you deserve to know the truth." Because your daughter deserves better than a father who puts his family at risk for a woman who sees him as a paycheck. James paused. And because I never stopped caring about what happened to you. Zara turned back to face him, her expression unreadable. James, we can't. I know. I'm not asking for anything, Zara. I'm just offering to help you get through this. And after? When Richard's out of the picture and the divorce is final. That's up to you. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. James was offering her everything: support, evidence, protection, without demanding anything in return. The contrast with Richard's selfishness was stark. I need to think about next steps, she said finally. What are you considering? Zara returned to the table and looked at the evidence spread before them. I'm considering burning his world down. James smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. Now that sounds like the Zara I remember. Just promise me something. Anything. When this is over, when Richard's paying for what he's done and Natalie's facing consequences for attacking me, promise me you won't disappear again. James stood up and moved closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Zara, I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. The baby chose that moment to kick hard enough that Zara gasped and pressed her hand to her belly. Without thinking, James reached out to steady her, his hand covering hers. She's strong, Zara whispered. Just like her mother. The Thompson Industries quarterly board meeting was always held in the executive conference room on the 40th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Zara had attended these gatherings before as Richard's supportive wife, smiling and making small talk with investors and board members while Richard basked in their approval. Today she entered the building with a different purpose entirely. James had arranged for her visitor pass, officially listing her as a guest of the security department for a facility tour. The cover story would hold up to casual scrutiny while giving her access to the executive floors during the exact time when Richard would be presenting quarterly projections to the board. Remember, James said quietly as they rode the elevator up, you're just a concerned wife bringing her husband lunch. Nothing suspicious about that. Zara adjusted the bag containing the catered meal she'd ordered from Richard's favorite restaurant. Inside, along with his preferred sandwich and coffee, was a tablet loaded with every piece of evidence they'd gathered over the past week. She'd also included printed copies of the most damaging financial records, neatly organized in folders. What if he doesn't take the bait? He will. Richard's ego won't let him pass up an opportunity to show off in front of the board, especially if his pregnant wife is there to play the devoted spouse. James's expression darkened. He has no idea what's coming. The elevator opened on the executive floor, and Zara felt her heart rate spike. She'd been here countless times, but never as anything other than Richard's accessory. Today she was the one in control. James escorted her to the reception area outside the conference room, where muted voices could be heard through the heavy wooden doors. Richard's presentation was in full swing, his confident tone carrying through the walls as he discussed profit margins and expansion opportunities. Mrs. Thompson, the receptionist smiled. How nice to see you. The meeting should be finishing soon. I brought Richard lunch, Zara said, holding up the bag. I know how he gets when these meetings run long. That's so thoughtful. I'll let him know you're here. Actually, Zara said quickly, I was hoping to surprise him. Could I just slip in quietly? I promise I won't interrupt. The receptionist hesitated, but James stepped forward with his security badge. I can escort Mrs. Thompson in and make sure she doesn't disrupt the proceedings. Of course, Colonel Rodriguez. Go right ahead. James opened the conference room door silently, and Zara entered to find 12 board members seated around the mahogany table, their attention focused on Richard's PowerPoint presentation. Her husband stood at the head of the table in his custom suit, gesturing confidently at charts showing company growth. As you can see, Richard was saying, our third quarter performance exceeded expectations in every category. Client retention is up, new acquisitions are profitable, and employee satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in 5 years. Zara took a seat in one of the chairs along the wall, designed for observers and note-takers. Several board members nodded at her politely, recognizing her from previous company events. Richard's eyes widened in surprise when he spotted her, but he recovered quickly, flashing his practiced smile. Gentlemen, it looks like my beautiful wife has brought me sustenance to get through the rest of our meeting, Richard said, his tone affectionate and indulgent. Isn't she wonderful? The board members chuckled appreciatively, and Zara felt bile rise in her throat. Richard's public persona was so polished, so convincing. These men saw him as a devoted husband and successful CEO, having no idea about the double life he'd been leading. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Zara said, standing and approaching the table. "I know how important these meetings are, but I wanted to make sure you ate something, darling." She placed the bag on the table in front of Richard and kissed his cheek, the gesture feeling like acid on her lips. His cologne, the same scent she'd once loved, now made her nauseous. "You didn't have to come all the way downtown," Richard said, but his hand squeezed her shoulder possessively. "Though I'm always happy to see my gorgeous wife." "Actually," Zara said, her voice carrying just far enough for the entire room to hear, "I needed to discuss something important with you. Something that affects the company." Richard's smile faltered slightly. "Sweetheart, perhaps we should wait until after." "It really can't wait." Zara opened the bag and pulled out the tablet, her movements deliberate and calm. "You see, I've been reviewing our household finances, and I found some discrepancies that I think the board should be aware of." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Richard's face went pale and several board members exchanged glances. "Zara," Richard said, his voice tight with warning, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh, but it is." Zara turned to face the board members directly. "Gentlemen, I'm sure you're all aware that company resources should be used exclusively for legitimate business purposes, correct?" "Of course," said Harold Morrison, the board chairman. "That's fundamental corporate governance." "Then you'll be interested to know that my husband has been using Thompson Industries credit cards to fund a 6-month affair with a woman named Natalie Pierce." Zara's voice remained steady even as Richard made a strangled sound. "Hotel rooms charged as business travel, restaurant bills listed as client entertainment, jewelry purchases disguised as corporate gifts." "That's enough," Richard said, standing abruptly. "Zara, you're upset, you're hormonal, you don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Zara activated the tablet, projecting the first image onto the conference room's smart screen. It showed Richard and Natalie entering the Ritz-Carlton together, the timestamp clearly visible. "This was last Tuesday when you told me you were at the Chicago manufacturing facility." The board members stared at the screen in shocked silence. Harold Morrison's face had gone red with anger. "Zara, stop this immediately," Richard hissed, reaching for the tablet. "You're embarrassing yourself." James materialized at Richard's shoulder, his presence suddenly menacing. "I wouldn't touch the evidence if I were you." "Evidence?" Richard looked between James and Zara, his confusion genuine. "What is this? What are you doing here?" "Providing security for Mrs. Thompson while she presents information that affects company integrity," James said calmly. Zara clicked to the next image, GPS data showing Richard's company car parked at Natalie's apartment building during work hours. "This represents over 40 instances of unauthorized personal use of company vehicles." "My God," whispered board member Patricia Chin. "Richard, is this true?" "It's taken out of context," Richard said desperately. "I can explain everything." "Can you explain this?" Zara displayed the credit card statements, highlighting charges totaling nearly $50,000. "Company funds used to maintain your mistress over the past 6 months." The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief and anger. Harold Morrison stood up, his face thunderous. "Richard, these are very serious allegations." "They're lies," Richard shouted, then seemed to realize his mistake. His voice dropped to a more reasonable tone. "My wife is 7 months pregnant." "She's not thinking clearly. The stress of pregnancy can cause." "The stress of pregnancy," Zara interrupted, "is nothing compared to the stress of being assaulted by your mistress in a parking garage while carrying your child." She clicked to the security footage James had cleaned up and enhanced. The attack played in stark detail on the conference room screen, Natalie striking Zara's pregnant belly with her purse, the vicious words clearly audible through the audio enhancement. 2 of the board members stood up in shock. Patricia Chin gasped and covered her mouth. "Jesus Christ, Richard," Harold Morrison said. "That woman attacked your pregnant wife." "I had nothing to do with that," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I never told her to." "You told her I was weak," Zara said, advancing on him. "You told her I was pathetic, that I would forgive anything. You gave her my schedule, my routines, access to information about when I'd be vulnerable." "That's not true." Zara pulled out the printed phone records. "Text messages between you and Natalie Pierce, discussing my doctor's appointments. Planning when to meet based on my absence from the house. Coordinating your lies with her schedule." She threw the papers on the conference table, where they scattered like accusations across the polished wood. "Gentlemen," Zara said, turning back to the board, "I present to you a man who has embezzled company funds, violated corporate policies, compromised business integrity, and enabled violence against his pregnant wife. I trust you'll handle this appropriately. Harold Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. Richard, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. You can't do this, Richard said, but his bluster was gone. I built this company. Your father built this company, Patricia Chin said coldly. And you've just destroyed it. James stepped forward, no longer bothering to hide his satisfaction. Sir, I'll need your key card, company phone, and any other Thompson Industries property. As Richard fumbled with his belongings, his eyes met Zara's across the wreckage of his career. The look he gave her was pure hatred, as if she was responsible for his downfall rather than simply the messenger of his own choices. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Both of you. The only thing I regret, Zara replied, is not doing it sooner. James escorted Richard from the room, leaving Zara alone with the board members. The silence stretched for long moments before Harold Morrison spoke. Mrs. Thompson, I cannot adequately apologize for what you've endured. This behavior is completely unacceptable. Thank you, Zara said. I hope the company can recover from this. The company will be fine. But what about you? Are you safe? Do you need protection? Zara looked toward the door where James had disappeared with her soon-to-be ex-husband. I think I'm in good hands. The video of Richard's public disgrace went viral within hours. Someone in the board meeting had recorded Zara's presentation on their phone, and by evening #PregnantWifeRevenge was trending on social media. The footage of Natalie's attack, combined with the evidence of Richard's embezzlement, created a perfect storm of public outrage. Zara watched the chaos unfold from her living room, James sitting beside her with his laptop open, monitoring the news coverage and social media response. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop with calls from reporters, friends, and family members who'd seen the story break. Channel 7 is leading with it, James said, turning up the volume on the television. They're calling it the ultimate corporate takedown. The news anchor was speaking over footage of Richard being escorted from the Thompson Industries building by security. CEO Richard Thompson was terminated today after his pregnant wife presented evidence of embezzlement and adultery to the company's board of directors. The dramatic confrontation was captured on video and has shocked the business community. Zara's phone rang again, her sister calling for the 5th time. She let it go to voicemail. You should probably talk to family, James said gently. They're worried about you. I will. Just not yet. Zara shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her back aching from the day's stress. I need to process this first. The news switched to an interview with Harold Morrison, Thompson Industries board chairman, speaking from the company's headquarters. We are appalled by Mr. Thompson's conduct and the harm caused to his family. The board has voted unanimously to terminate his employment and pursue full recovery of misappropriated funds. We stand behind Mrs. Thompson and condemn any violence against pregnant women. They're handling it well, James observed. Smart to get ahead of the story. What about Natalie? Police issued a warrant this afternoon. Assault on a pregnant woman is a felony, plus they're investigating her role in the financial crimes. James showed her a news article on his laptop. She's been arrested. The mugshot photo showed Natalie looking significantly less polished than she had in the parking garage. Her blonde hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her expression held the shock of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed. Good, Zara said, surprised by the vehemence in her own voice. There's more. James pulled up another article. Turns out 3 other wives have come forward with similar stories about Natalie targeting their husbands. She's facing additional charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. Zara felt a grim satisfaction. Natalie had built a career on destroying families, and now she was facing the consequences. The other wives, women Zara had never met but felt a kinship with, had found their voices because she'd found the courage to speak first. The doorbell rang, making them both tense. Zara peered through the window and saw Richard's Mercedes in the driveway. He's not supposed to be here, James said, standing immediately. The restraining order. I haven't filed it yet. Technically he still lives here. Zara struggled to her feet, her pregnant belly making quick movements difficult. But I don't want to see him. You don't have to. I'll handle this. James opened the door before Richard could ring the bell again. Her soon-to-be ex-husband looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his expensive suit wrinkled. He'd been drinking. Zara could smell the alcohol from across the room. Get out of my way, Richard said, trying to push past James. I need to talk to my wife. Your wife doesn't want to see you. James didn't move, his military training evident in his stance. And you're in violation of the terms discussed with the board. This is my house. That's my wife carrying my child. You have no right. I have every right, Zara said, appearing behind James. And this isn't your house anymore. I've already spoken to my attorney. Richard's face crumpled, and for a moment, he looked like the college boy she'd once loved. Zara, please. Let me explain. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, I can change. You had a woman attack me while I was pregnant with your child. Zara's voice was steady, final. There's nothing to fix. I never told her to hurt you. I swear, I had no idea she would do that. But you told her about me. You gave her ammunition to use against me. You made me a target. Zara stepped forward, and James shifted to stay between her and Richard. You prioritized your affair over our safety. It meant nothing. She was exciting, different. She made me feel young again. Richard's words slurred slightly. But I love you. I love our baby. I want us to be a family. We will be a family. Just not with you. Richard's expression shifted from pleading to angry. You think you can just throw me away? Take my child and my house and ruin my career? I think I can protect my daughter from a father who puts his sexual gratification ahead of her well-being. Our daughter, Richard said, stepping closer. She's my child too, and I won't let you keep her from me. James moved forward, his presence suddenly intimidating. I think you should leave now. And I think you should remember that you work for me, Richard snapped. Actually, I work for Thompson Industries. And you don't work there anymore. The truth hit Richard like a physical blow. His job, his identity, his social standing, everything he'd built his self-worth on was gone. The board's decision had been swift and brutal, exactly as Zara had planned. This isn't over, Richard said, backing toward the door. I'll fight for custody. I'll contest the divorce. I'll make sure you get nothing. You'll lose, Zara said simply. And everyone will know why. After Richard left, slamming the door behind him, Zara sank back onto the couch with a shaky sigh. The adrenaline that had carried her through the day was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Are you okay? James asked, sitting beside her. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of him exactly, but of what comes next. Single motherhood, court battles, raising a daughter whose father is a public disgrace. You're the strongest person I know, James said quietly. And you won't be doing it alone. Zara looked at him, this man who'd appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was making. James, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Always. Is this about justice, or is this about us? James was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. It started as justice. Seeing that footage, knowing you were in danger, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. But helping you, seeing your strength, remembering what we had. He met her eyes. I'd be lying if I said it was only about justice. And what do you want from me? Nothing you're not ready to give. Nothing that compromises your healing or your focus on your daughter. James reached for her hand, stopping just short of touching her. I want whatever you want, Zara. If that's friendship, I'll take it. If it's nothing, I'll accept that too. Zara closed the distance between their hands, intertwining their fingers. I don't know what I want yet. But I know I don't want you to disappear again. I won't. I promise. Outside, the media circus continued, but inside the house that was now truly hers, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war wasn't over, but she'd won the first battle. And she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras as Zara emerged from her divorce hearing 6 weeks later. Her attorney, Margaret Foster, had been worth every penny. The settlement was everything Zara had hoped for and more. Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel about today's outcome? A reporter called out, shoving a microphone toward her face. I feel that justice has been served, Zara replied calmly, one hand resting on her now 8-month pregnant belly. My daughter and I are secure, and that's what matters most. James appeared at her side, his presence causing the reporters to surge forward with new questions. The story of the pregnant wife, the cheating CEO, and the Marine who'd helped expose it all had captivated the public for weeks. Colonel Rodriguez, what's your relationship with Mrs. Thompson now? Another reporter shouted. I'm a friend helping ensure her safety during this difficult time, James replied diplomatically, guiding Zara toward the waiting car. Inside the vehicle, away from the media frenzy, Zara finally allowed herself to smile. The settlement had awarded her 70% of Richard's assets, including the house, his investment portfolio, and a substantial monthly support payment. Richard's legal team had tried to fight it, but the evidence of his embezzlement and adultery had been overwhelming. "Congratulations," James said, starting the engine. "How does it feel to be officially separated from Richard Thompson?" "Like I can breathe again." Zara leaned back against the leather seat, exhausted but triumphant. "Margaret says the final divorce decree should be processed within 30 days. And Richard? Probably drinking himself into a stupor at whatever cheap hotel he's calling home these days." Zara felt no satisfaction in Richard's downfall, only relief that it was over. His lawyer said he's planning to appeal, but Margaret doesn't think he has grounds. They drove in comfortable silence through downtown traffic, passing the Thompson Industries building where James still worked, though under new management now. The board had promoted Patricia Chen to interim CEO, and the company's stock price had actually improved once Richard's financial irregularities were corrected. "There's something I need to tell you," James said as they pulled into Zara's driveway. "I've been offered a position with a private security firm in San Francisco. It's a promotion, more money, better benefits." Zara's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity." "It is. But I turned it down." "Why?" James turned off the engine and faced her. "Because my life is here now. Because I made a promise not to disappear again, and I meant it." "James, you can't make career decisions based on—" "I'm not. I'm making them based on what makes me happy." He reached for her hand. "For 20 years, I've been running from one assignment to another, one deployment to the next, never staying anywhere long enough to build something real. I'm tired of running." Zara studied his face, seeing sincerity and determination in his dark eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to be here when your daughter is born. I want to help you build the life you deserve. I want to find out what happens when I stop being a coward and fight for what matters." Before Zara could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and frowned. "What is it?" James asked. "Natalie's sentencing hearing is scheduled for next week. The prosecutor wants me to give a victim impact statement." "Are you going to do it?" Zara considered the question. Natalie Pierce had pled guilty to assault, conspiracy to commit fraud, and 3 counts of theft by deception related to her pattern of targeting married men. She was facing significant prison time, and Zara's statement could influence the judge's decision. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I need to. I'll go with you." "You don't have to." "Zara." James squeezed her hand gently. "You've faced everything else alone. You don't have to face this alone too." A week later, Zara stood at the podium in the downtown courthouse, facing Judge Patricia Hendricks while Natalie sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. The woman who'd once seemed so polished and threatening now looked small and defeated. "Your Honor," Zara began, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom, "6 months ago, Natalie Pierce attacked me in a parking garage while I was pregnant. She struck me with her purse, threatened me, and tried to intimidate me into accepting my husband's affair." She paused, looking directly at Natalie. "But what Miss Pierce didn't understand is that violence doesn't create weakness, it reveals strength. Her attack didn't break me, it motivated me to fight back." Natalie kept her eyes downcast, refusing to meet Zara's gaze. "The defendant has a pattern of targeting vulnerable families and destroying marriages for financial gain. She sees pregnant wives as obstacles to be removed rather than human beings deserving of respect. This isn't just about what she did to me, it's about protecting other families from her predatory behavior." Zara placed her hand on her belly, where her daughter was moving restlessly. "My child will grow up knowing that when someone tries to hurt you, you don't have to accept it. You can fight back. You can demand justice. And you can win." Judge Hendricks nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Your statement will be considered in sentencing." 2 hours later, Natalie Pierce was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to Zara and the other victims. As the bailiff led her away, Natalie finally looked up, her eyes meeting Zara's across the courtroom. There was no apology there, no remorse, just the cold calculation of someone who'd been caught and was already planning her next move. It confirmed what Zara had suspected all along. Natalie wasn't sorry for what she'd done, only sorry she'd been exposed. Outside the courthouse, James wrapped his arm around Zara's shoulders as they faced another crowd of reporters. "Mrs. Thompson, do you feel justice has been served?" "I feel that consequences have been imposed," Zara replied carefully. "True justice would be Natalie recognizing the harm she's caused and changing her behavior. But accountability is a start. What's next for you?" Zara smiled, looking up at James. "Focus on my daughter's birth and building a new life. The past is behind me now. As they walked away from the courthouse steps, Zara felt lighter than she had in months. Richard was facing his own legal battles. The district attorney had filed charges for embezzlement and fraud. Natalie was going to prison. And Zara was free to move forward. "How do you feel?" James asked as they reached the car. "Like I can finally start living again instead of just surviving." James opened the passenger door for her, then paused. "Zara, I know this isn't the right time and I know you need space to heal, but I need you to know something." "What?" 8 years ago I loved you and was too scared to fight for you. Today I love you more than I did then and I'm not scared anymore." His voice was steady, sure. "Whatever you need, however long it takes, I'm here." Zara looked at this man who'd appeared when she needed him most, who'd helped her find her strength, who'd never asked for anything in return. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibility. "Ask me again after the baby comes," she said softly. "When I'm thinking more clearly and feeling more like myself." "I will. Promise." James smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "I promise. I'm not going anywhere, Zara. Not this time." As they drove home through the city streets, Zara felt her daughter kick strongly against her ribs. A fighter, just like her mother. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Justice had been served, but more importantly, hope had been restored. The first contraction hit Zara at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Natalie's sentencing. She'd been dreaming about college, walking across campus with James, planning a future that had never materialized when the pain woke her with stunning intensity. James had been sleeping in the guest bedroom for the past month, officially there for security but really because Zara had grown comfortable with his presence. She found herself talking to him about everything: her fears about motherhood, her anger at Richard, her uncertainty about the future. He listened without judgment, offered practical advice, and never pushed for more than she was ready to give. "James," she called out, gripping the doorframe as another contraction rolled through her. "I think it's time." He appeared instantly, alert and dressed as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "How far apart are the contractions?" "About 5 minutes, I think. They just started." Zara breathed through the pain, remembering her birthing class instructions. "We should probably head to the hospital." "Already packed," James said, grabbing her hospital bag from the closet. "I've been ready for weeks." The drive to the hospital was surreal, city streets empty except for a few delivery trucks and early commuters. Zara focused on her breathing while James navigated traffic with military precision, getting her to the maternity ward in record time. "Mrs. Thompson," the intake nurse smiled warmly. "We've been expecting you. Dr. Martinez is on her way." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of contractions, breathing exercises and ice chips. James never left her side, holding her hand through the worst contractions and talking her through each wave of pain. He'd seen combat, but watching Zara labor to bring her daughter into the world was the most intense experience of his life. "She's almost here," Dr. Martinez announced during the final push. "One more contraction and you'll meet your baby." Zara bore down with everything she had, and suddenly the room filled with the sound of a newborn's cry. Her daughter, red-faced and furious at being evicted from her warm cocoon, announced her arrival to the world with impressive lung power. "She's beautiful," James whispered, tears streaming down his face as Dr. Martinez placed the baby on Zara's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Zara looked down at her daughter, tiny and wrinkled but undeniably perfect, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This little girl had been through everything with her, had felt every emotion, every moment of stress and triumph. Now they were both free to start fresh. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered, stroking the baby's dark hair. "I'm your mama." The baby settled against Zara's chest, her cries quieting as she heard the familiar sound of her mother's heartbeat. In that moment, everything else faded away: the divorce proceedings, the media attention, the uncertainty about the future. There was only this: mother and daughter finally meeting face to face. "Have you chosen a name?" Dr. Martinez asked as she completed her post-delivery checks. "Hope," Zara said without hesitation. "Hope Elizabeth Thompson." James squeezed her hand gently. "It's perfect." Later, after the medical staff had finished their examinations and mother and baby were settled in their private room, Zara found herself alone with James and Hope. The baby was sleeping peacefully in the clear bassinet beside her bed, tiny fists curled against her cheeks. "She looks like you," James said softly, studying Hope's delicate features. "She looks like herself." Zara felt tears threatening again, happy tears this time. "James, I need to tell you something." "What?" "During labor, when the pain was worst, I kept thinking about what you said outside the courthouse. About loving me, about not being scared anymore. She met his eyes across the small space. I think I'm ready to not be scared anymore too. James moved closer to her bed, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you too. I think I never stopped loving you, even when I tried to convince myself I was happy with Richard. Zara's voice was soft but sure. I'm saying that if you're serious about staying, about building something real with me and Hope, then I want to try. Are you sure? It's been an emotional day, you're exhausted. I've never been more sure of anything. Zara reached for his hand. 8 years ago we were too young and too scared to fight for what we wanted. Now we're older, hopefully wiser and definitely braver. James brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I want to be Hope's father if you'll let me. Not biologically but in every way that matters. She'd be lucky to have you. I'd be the lucky one. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Hope sleep and processing the magnitude of the day. In 12 hours, everything had changed. Zara had become a mother, James had found his family, and Hope had entered a world where she was already deeply loved. What about Richard? James asked eventually. He'll want visitation rights. Let him try. Zara's voice hardened slightly. He'll have to prove he's fit to be around a child first. Given his recent legal troubles, that might be difficult. And if he does get visitation? Then Hope will know her biological father, but she'll also know the difference between a father and a dad. Zara looked at James meaningfully. One shares DNA. The other shows up every day. Hope stirred in her bassinet, making tiny mewling sounds that sent both adults into immediate alert mode. But she settled again, sighing in her sleep like she was perfectly content with her new world. She's amazing, James whispered. She's ours, Zara replied, and the words felt like a promise. Outside their hospital room window, the sun was rising over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the dawn of a new day, a new life, a new family built on love and choice rather than obligation and habit. Zara closed her eyes and let herself imagine the future. Hope taking her first steps, James teaching her to ride a bike, family vacations and birthday parties, and all the ordinary moments that would make up an extraordinary life. For the first time in months, the future looked bright. Get some rest, James said, settling into the chair beside her bed. I'll watch over both of you. Promise. For the rest of my life. As Zara drifted off to sleep, she felt safer and more content than she had since before her marriage started falling apart. Hope was healthy and beautiful, James was committed to their future, and Richard's ability to hurt them was finally at an end. Justice had been served, new life had arrived, and love had found its way home. 1 year later, Zara stood in the kitchen of their new house, bouncing Hope on her hip while she stirred pasta sauce with her free hand. The toddler babbled happily, reaching for everything within her grasp with the determined curiosity that had defined her personality from birth. Mama, 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 Hope chanted, her favorite word accompanied by enthusiastic arm waving. Yes, baby girl, I'm mama, Zara laughed, kissing her daughter's forehead. And you're my perfect little chatterbox. The kitchen was bright and airy, nothing like the sterile showplace she'd shared with Richard. This house, smaller but infinitely more welcoming, reflected her own taste rather than someone else's expectations. Colorful artwork covered the refrigerator, toy bins sat in corners, and every surface showed evidence of a life being actively lived. James's key turned in the front door just as the timer for the garlic bread went off. Hope immediately began bouncing with excitement, recognizing the sound of her favorite person's arrival. Dada. Dada, she squealed, reaching toward the doorway. There's my girl, James said, entering the kitchen still in his work clothes but grinning broadly. Hope launched herself from Zara's arms to his, trusting completely that he would catch her. How was work? Zara asked, accepting his kiss on the cheek as he cuddled Hope close. Good. The Henderson account finally signed, and we landed the Morrison contract. James had started his own security consulting firm 6 months earlier, building a client base of companies that wanted military-grade protection without the corporate bureaucracy. How was your day? Productive. I finished the proposal for the Hartwell wedding, and I have 3 new client consultations this week. Zara's event planning business had taken off faster than she'd expected, fueled partly by curiosity about her story but sustained by her genuine talent for organization and design. Hope wiggled to be put down, immediately toddling toward her toy box in the living room with the unsteady confidence of a 1-year-old who'd recently mastered walking. James watched her go with the expression of besotted adoration that never failed to warm Zara's heart. Any word from Richard's lawyer? He asked, lowering his voice. They withdrew the custody petition. Again. Zara felt no satisfaction in Richard's continued legal failures, only relief that Hope would remain protected from his chaos. Apparently, his second DUI made the judge less sympathetic to his parental rights arguments. Richard's downward spiral had continued throughout the year. After losing his job and most of his assets in the divorce, he'd moved to a different city and taken a sales position that barely covered his legal fees and court-ordered support payments. His drinking had worsened, leading to 2 arrests and a stint in rehab that he'd left early against medical advice. Good, James said simply. He'd never shown any vindictive pleasure in Richard's misfortunes, but he was fiercely protective of Hope and Zara's peace of mind. There's something else, Zara said, suddenly nervous about the conversation she'd been planning all day. I got a call from the adoption attorney. James went very still. And? The paperwork is ready. If you still want to proceed with adopting Hope, we can finalize everything next week. They discussed the adoption months ago, but James had insisted on waiting until Zara was completely certain about their relationship and their future. He didn't want legal ties to influence her feelings or create pressure she wasn't ready to handle. Are you sure? He asked quietly. Once we do this, there's no going back. I'll be Hope's father legally, financially, emotionally, everything. You're already her father in every way that matters, Zara replied. Hope deserves to have that recognized officially. As if summoned by their conversation, Hope toddled back into the kitchen carrying her favorite stuffed elephant. She raised her arms toward James, demanding to be picked up again. Up, Dada, up. James lifted her easily, and she immediately began patting his cheeks with her small hands, babbling in the secret language only she understood. I love you both more than life itself, James said, his voice thick with emotion. If you're sure about this, then yes. I want to adopt Hope. I want us to be a real family. We already are a real family, Zara said, moving closer so she could wrap her arms around both of them. But it'll be nice to make it official. Hope giggled and clapped her hands as if she approved of the group hug. Her dark curls bounced as she looked between the 2 adults who'd become her whole world, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and wanted and safe. There's one more thing, Zara said, stepping back with a mischievous smile that James recognized from their college days. I may have already planned our wedding. James nearly dropped Hope in surprise. Our what? Well, not planned exactly. But I may have tentatively booked the botanical gardens for next month and ordered a dress and contacted the caterer and… Zara Thompson, are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to marry us, she corrected, gesturing to include Hope. All 3 of us becoming a family officially and legally and completely. James set Hope down gently and pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Actually, I've been carrying this around for 2 months, waiting for the right moment to ask you the same question. Zara gasped as he opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring, nothing like the ostentatious rock Richard had given her years ago. This ring was classic, timeless, chosen with care and love rather than to impress others. Zara Elizabeth Thompson, James said, dropping to one knee right there in their kitchen while Hope clapped delightedly. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Hope and whatever other children we might have? Will you let me be the man I should have been 8 years ago? Yes, Zara whispered, tears streaming down her face. Yes to all of it. James slipped the ring onto her finger, and Hope immediately reached for it, fascinated by the way it caught the kitchen light. The 3 of them dissolved into laughter and hugs, Hope squealing with joy even though she had no idea what was happening. So, James said when they'd all calmed down, you really already planned our wedding? I may have gotten a little carried away, Zara admitted. I was so nervous about asking you that I started planning as a way to convince myself it could actually happen. What if I'd said no? Then I would have had to cancel a lot of vendors and probably eaten my weight in cake samples for nothing. James kissed her thoroughly, Hope giggling between them as she tried to join in. Good thing I said yes then. Good thing. Later that evening, after Hope was asleep in her crib and they'd called both sets of parents with their news, Zara and James sat on their back porch swing, planning their future under a canopy of stars. I want a small ceremony, Zara said, her head on James's shoulder. Just family and close friends. Nothing fancy or showy. Whatever makes you happy. I want Hope to be our flower girl, even though she'll probably eat the petals instead of throwing them. James laughed. She'll be perfect. I want a honeymoon somewhere with beaches and room service and absolutely no schedules. Done. And I want to have more children. With you. Soon. James turned to look at her in surprise. How soon? Well, not immediately. But maybe in a year or 2. Hope should have siblings, don't you think? I think Hope should have whatever makes her happy. And if that's siblings, then we'll give her siblings. They swung gently in the cool evening air, comfortable in their shared silence. Somewhere across town, Richard was probably sitting in whatever bar would still serve him, drowning his sorrows and blaming everyone but himself for his failures. Natalie was in a prison cell, serving her sentence and planning whatever scheme would follow her release. But here, in this house full of love and laughter and hope, none of that mattered. The past was truly behind them now, buried under layers of new memories and better choices. Do you ever regret it? James asked quietly. Any of it? The confrontation, the divorce, choosing me over trying to fix things with Richard? Zara considered the question seriously. A year ago, she'd been married to a wealthy CEO, living in a mansion, respected in social circles that now wanted nothing to do with her ex-husband. On paper, her old life had looked perfect. In reality, it had been a prison built of lies and maintained by fear. I regret trusting Richard for as long as I did, she said finally. I regret not seeing through Natalie's manipulations sooner. I regret that Hope will grow up knowing her biological father chose his affair over his family. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret exposing the truth. And I definitely don't regret falling in love with you. She lifted her head to meet his eyes. This life we're building, it's real. It's honest. It's built on choice rather than obligation. I love you, James said simply. I love you too. Both of us do. As if summoned by their conversation, Hope's voice drifted through the baby monitor, singing herself back to sleep with a tuneless lullaby that sounded like pure joy. They listened to their daughter's happy babbling, marveling at the resilience of a child who'd been born into chaos but had only known love and security. She's going to be amazing, Zara said. Just like her mother. The swing creaked gently as they rocked together, planning wedding details and discussing James's adoption paperwork and dreaming about the family they were creating. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Hope's teething, client meetings, the endless logistics of blending two independent lives into one shared future. But tonight, under the stars that had witnessed every triumph and heartbreak, Zara felt complete. She'd found her courage, fought her battles, and won the war for her own happiness. Justice had been served, love had conquered all, and the future stretched ahead of them like an open road full of possibilities. Hope Elizabeth Thompson Rodriguez would grow up knowing she was wanted, protected, and cherished by two parents who'd chosen each other and chosen her. She would never doubt her worth or accept less than she deserved because her mother had shown her what it meant to fight for what was right. And someday, when Hope was old enough to understand, Zara would tell her the story of how they'd found each other, not just mother and daughter, but all three of them, becoming a family through courage, love, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be happy.